Medical training. Have you had some? What does that even mean, medical training, in the context of the space that we're in right now? In that space, I guess I would say self-defense, preparation to avoid disaster, and preparation to win and continue living should life dish out something less than desirable to us. Mickey with CarryTrainer.com. I'd like to talk a little bit about this idea of medical training for us everyday people, moms, dads, teachers, lawyers, doctors even. What? A doctor needs medical training? Well, when we have these buzzwords, these catch-all phrases, we should probably drill in. I've got buddies that are dentists, anesthesiologists, researchers, phlebotomists, chiropractors, you name it. They're all medical people, right? But what are we specifically talking about? We're talking about the ability to intervene in a bad situation on our behalf or somebody else's, should we choose or should we need to. Could be a loved one, could be a stranger, and help them get to a higher level of care, sustain life, really, and go on living. Now, that could look like a lot of things. I'm going to tell a few stories during this video of real life things that have happened to me and share some concepts and ideas of what I think is important to everyday people. So first of all, Mickey with CarryTrainer.com. Thank you for joining us today. Very clinical. We've got the white tablecloth out because I want to be able to properly see some things. I'm an EMT, gone through that program twice. I teach CPR. We teach some emergency medical techniques at some of our events, like our big S12 event. My friends come out and we teach TCCC, Tactical Combat Casualty Care, and we can dig into that a little bit. What's important? I guess with everything, as you guys have heard me say, what's the goal? What's the desired end state? In many jobs, medical professions, we have scopes of care, right? Or scopes of practice. So a paramedic can provide more care, has a broader scope than an EMT. A nurse or a doctor has a broader or wider scope of care than the lower tiers, like the EMT or the paramedic, right? So on and so forth. So I think we should decide, what is my scope? What things should I be capable of? Am I willing to be capable of? I've got a little sister named Mary. She lives on an island, a legitimate island off the coast of Maine. And while it's close, it's a boat ride, they're still on an island. So she is one of the several first responders on the island, trained as a wilderness EMT. So they've got a scope of practice that takes into consideration the remoteness of where they live. So they've got some different ideas and different needs than, say, somebody that lives in Manhattan. Now, somebody in Manhattan would also have some different needs, right? Maybe I need to be able to deal with 40 floors of a building where an elevator might not work, right? So we got to think about, what skills do I want? Oftentimes in this space, we start out with something like this, right? Well, I need to be able to protect myself from the bad guys. So we go out and we get a sweet pistol, nice holster. And then, you know, maybe if we're grew up like a farm kid, you've got a pocket knife. Of course, you need a good flashlight. Surefire, this is one of my favorite. This is the EDCL1-T. I don't even think they make this one exactly like this anymore. I'm only going to tell you this because guys are going to ask in the comments, and now you don't have to. This is a Spider Co. This is a sweet knife. I've had this one for years. Lovely blade. Anyway, Boresight Solutions Glock in a Dark Star gear holster. Yes, loaded with Super Bell ammunition. Ameriglow sights, Apex trigger, Mickey shooting it, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, back to the medical stuff. What scope do you want to be able to intervene with? I think we should start out with this. When you take any type of emergency medical training, be it as a first responder, police officer, an EMT, a paramedic, there's a theme that comes up constantly, and it's this: is the scene safe? Is the scene safe? Is it okay for me to enter into this place? I'm going to tell you a story, and it's going to perfectly illustrate this. I have a friend who's no longer with us. His name was Mark. Mark was a super intelligent guy. He was a very high-level mechanic, worked for a European car maker, super sharp, super intelligent. These guys were part of an organization that helped teach youngsters firearm safety and marksmanship. They were having a shoot one fall day. They've got a bunch of 22s that were donated by a big firearm company, and they're teaching these kids the basic fundamentals of marksmanship. It's cold, so these guys decide that they're going to bring chili or soup, like something like that, out to this event. So they've got all the stuff, you know, crock pots and all that jazz, and they had an item that was missing. So Mark says, I'll go home, I'll grab it, I'm only 5 minutes away. Mark disappears. This guy's in his early 50s at the time. He doesn't come back. So somebody's like trying to call him, they can't get a hold of Mark. So Dave goes, I'll go figure out what the heck's going on with Mark. Mark had a couple health issues, so maybe they thought maybe he fell. He used a cane. They thought maybe he fell or something like that. So Dave disappears. Dave doesn't come back. What the heck? Lee says, I will go. If I don't come back, call 911. Now, Lee, retired Army colonel, which doesn't mean anything in the sense other than this is an intelligent dude too. And all of a sudden the phone rings and he calls the guys at the range with terrible news. Both Mark and Dave are deceased. There was a buildup of carbon monoxide in the garage at Mark's home. When Mark went in to get whatever it was he was looking for, he succumbed to the carbon monoxide and died. When Dave arrived, he rushed to Mark's aid, and in trying to help him, he succumbed and died. As Lee arrived on the scene, Lee checked to make sure the scene was safe, and he saw these guys through a window and knew better than to go in. Something clicked. It's a horrible story, and I knew those men personally, broke bread with them, did work for them in various occasions, and the organization that I used to be part of, the Right to Carry Association, did work with their organization, the Sportsmen's Association. I know that they would want their story told because of that lesson. Is the scene safe? So yesterday I'm on my way to a concert. Freaking Doobie Brothers, man. Doobie Brothers and Steve Winwood. We're driving down a busy freeway, and all of a sudden, GPSs are amazing. They tell me that there's a slowdown up ahead. So I'm going to take a look. What's going on? Is there a police pulled somebody over? Is there an accident? Is there construction? And it had just happened, which is amazing how fast these GPSs update. There was a collision between a semi-truck and a small SUV. And I don't need to get involved in everything. I'm not out trying to drive around and look to just jump out of my car and do stuff. In fact, I did not want to be late for this concert. It was, something we were looking forward to doing. But as I looked over, as we got close, I could see a woman kind of on her hands and knees on the side of the road. And I thought, if not me, then who, is kind of what we say. So we pulled over really quick and I jogged out, and there wasn't a lot I could do for her. She was coherent. She knew her name. She knew where she was. We kind of went through a little discussion. I gave her a quick head to toe. And really my whole role there was to make sure a car didn't hit her. And in that story, I want to mention there were 3 really awesome people that pulled over to help. Somebody called 911 and got on that, and we relayed information. I had a guy just watching traffic because, as people are pulling up at 70 miles an hour to this fresh accident, they don't know what's happening. So what do people do? They look and they're whacking their brakes. So I want to make sure that we don't get run over. That was like my number one concern. I also didn't want to go dragging this lady around because she had some type of head injury. There was no blood or anything like that, but she was really complaining of a lot of pain. Something struck her. So I didn't want to be moving her around like crazy, although I would rather risk moving her than have us get run over. So that's a whole nother discussion, and that's not the nature of this video. But all I could do was talk with her, and probably the best thing was to let her know people are here, we care about you, you're not alone out here. Help, real help, the fire and EMS people are coming. And as soon as they pulled up, I jumped back in the truck and split. And that's not a pat me on the back thing, because I couldn't do anything other than talk with her and make sure that there was nothing further going to happen. But oftentimes that's the best thing. Can I keep the scene safe and the person involved in the scene, which could be a choking child, it could be a burning building, it could be that car crash, it could be a cardiac event, it could be some kind of violence, right, that we plan for. A couple years ago, I had a young man send me a picture. I never actually met him, but he had purchased one of our CarryTrainer shirts, and it was a picture somebody took of him. He was at some type of a bar or restaurant and witnessed some crazy stabbing, and he didn't know any of these people. He intervened and applied pressure dressings and tourniquets and probably saved this person's life, but it was cool because he had a CarryTrainer shirt on, so he sent me that. That kind of stuff happens, right? What skills do I need? So let's talk a little bit about gear. You know, we buy this stuff, and then nowadays this becomes like the next thing. This is a ubiquitous piece of gear. Oh, you don't have a pocket knife? You don't have a flashlight? You don't have a tourniquet? This is a really cool tool for a very singular event. You talk to firefighter paramedics in big cities, and for years they were taught not to use these. The Global War on Terror, the Ranger Regiment, really, they proved out that the ability to get people to a hospital with all their blood in them, or more blood than not, is a really helpful thing, right? That being said, this is not an end-all be-all. This stops bleeding on extremities, right? Arms and legs. It's meant for massive bleeding, and it's a singular tool, right? So enter the IFAK, right? Not something new by any means, but I just have a couple of them here. And we start to think about things like pressure dressings and combat type gauze, things of that nature. I'm going to come back to this, but this has become like the thing, right? Well, you got to get your little IFAK and you got to drag that around with you. Well, even that little IFAK is only for an individual first aid kit, by the way, is only for so many things, right? You can get bigger ones. Oh, here's a bigger one. I got 2 tourniquets, right? This is one that we actually will have on our website shortly. You start to think about things like some adjunct airways, a nasal pharyngeal, and I'm going to kind of dig into some of this stuff a little bit, but at what point does it end, right? At what point does it end? Well, I mean, you could get into something like this, right? Well, because if you're serious about this stuff, now you can start to dig in a little deeper, and I can start to look at things like, oh, here's, I got some eye protection, right? For maybe some type of injury that happens to an eye. Hell, this one, I've got stuff to do staples. I've got some medication in here. I've got splints. I've got burn treatment. I've got all kinds of stuff, but maybe that's not enough. Maybe, maybe I need something like this. Maybe I need to drop thousands of dollars and get into something like this, where now I've got an AED, I've got O2 in here. You see a bunch more stuff. Well, all of that stuff is really contingent upon knowledge and the ability to use this stuff, right? None of this stuff matters if it's just sitting. And oftentimes in this space, we go out and we buy stuff, right? It's neat. How many things like this do you have? How many flashlights do you guys have? How many little kits and things do you have? And that's cool, nothing wrong with it. I would rather have the know-how than a bunch of stuff. My dear friend Joel Gupton, I quote often as saying this: our greatest resource is resourcefulness. Our greatest resource is resourcefulness. Of course, having the gear. He was a Green Beret 18 Delta, so he was a medic as a Green Beret, a very good one. Super intelligent dude, knew his stuff. But resourcefulness, right? If I don't have a compressed gauze or some type of hemostatic agent, what else do I have? Can I stuff a wound with a t-shirt? What if there's more problems than what the gear I have available, right? When I'm traveling and I'm in the airlines and things like that, I don't have this, right? I don't have the big one that rides around with us to classes. I can't, right? I have something smaller than this, and while that's great, this is really enough to deal with like one person, maybe 2 people, some type of violence that you might witness, some type of accident, right? Not everything's violence. The accident that we just talked about, does the stuff I have help me with that? Maybe, maybe not. What's important? Number 1, sustaining life. CPR should be like a number 1 go-to priority, and I don't think you should just do it every 2 years. You should train it. If you can afford a few $100, you can go on Amazon and you can buy a dummy. an infant and an adult dummy. You can keep that thing in a closet, and you and your loved ones, you and your family, you by yourself, if it's just you, can practice for 5 minutes every month or two, just 5 minutes. You pull that thing out. What you're going to do, the thing that we like to say, exposure equals composure. You attach the mechanical training, and I'm a CPR instructor, so I'm not talking out my butt. You attach that mechanical training to thoughts and a mindset of, if I ever need to do this, I practiced. I know what I need to do. I'm going to win. Recently, we did a video on some dry fire stuff, and there was a couple commenters. There was a big pushback. Dry fire is nothing more than just practicing mechanical skills. Bullcrap. Dry fire, and we could just say dry practice, because CPR on a dummy is dry practice, right? Instead of pressing on a trigger or working on a draw stroke or a load, I'm working on CPR. I'm working on communicating with a teammate, with a friend, with a loved one on how to properly deal with the scene. I'm working on things like making sure EMS is coming to the proper space and communication, things like that. That's why we go through those things. When we're dry practicing, a rehearsal, we're rehearsing, right? We can use visualization to not just visualize an event, to not just visualize the training, to not just visualize the mechanical skill, but I can visualize a good outcome. If you think that that's hocus pocus or foo-foo or some type of silly thing, who does this? Major league athletes, football, baseball, basketball, etc. Top level pilots, from airlines to military pilots to stunt pilots. Skydivers. From solo skydivers to team skydivers, surgeons, and I could list more and more. Am I making this up? No, I've asked people in these professions and spoke with them and interviewed them. I just had Doc Hoon on, who works with a major Green Beret unit, and this is what he works with them on. This is a core tenet of the things he does, which is great to hear, because it means we're not crazy, right? This stuff, how we practice with these things, it's just as important how we connect our thoughts. If it's, oh my God, I hope I never have to use this, it's so scary, it would be terrible, versus, I hope I never have to use this, but if I do, I'm going to be ready. That's why I purchased it, and I have trained myself. I'm going to be calm if I ever have to do this. I'm going to work the process that I've trained. And because I've trained studiously, because I've developed systems and processes in my training, up to and including even how I store this and where I store it so that I know where it is. Or if I have to say, you right there in the blue shirt, go to the Ford truck back there, the big gray truck, and look behind the driver's seat. You're going to see an orange suitcase. Go get it. Get it now and bring it to me, please. Now I can communicate that, right? That's why these things are made like this. Or go behind the back seat of the truck. There's a knapsack, a gray knapsack, and in that knapsack will be this red bag. Just grab the whole backpack. Bring it now. And when you get to me, I'll tell you to get this red bag out, right? We're working on communication. This whole idea of medical stuff, wrap this thing together in a nice, neat little bow. It's important that we train this stuff, but for years, myself included, people have gotten this idea of stacking certificates, right? I got another certificate, low light shotgun in the desert in August, right? There's like finer and finer things. Pistol 1, pistol 2, pistol 3 underwater, long range rifle while eating marshmallows, right? You just like keep adding things to the certificate. We have these broad medical ideas, right? So tactical combat casualty care or tactical emergency care, TECC. These things are important, but they're only as valuable as our ability to develop the skill, maintain the skill, and then be willing to act. I've got numerous stories that I share in classes where I was involved in something and either was able to help or I was not able to help. And in those stories are sort of what shaped me. I'm going to share one more with you. When I was about 17 years old, 18 years old, I've told this story before. I was on Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Lake Geneva is this beautiful, idyllic lake set in some rolling hills. It's a very large lake. It's deep, it's clear. And I was up there with some family friends. the father had rented a jet ski and asked me to help his daughters, some friends of ours, learn how to ride them. So we're off in an area of this lake, and it was like Labor Day or Memorial Day weekend. I don't even remember that detail now. I want to say it was Labor Day, where there was a lot of rental boats, jet skis, boats. And so I took, Ruth is her name. Ruth, if you see this, I miss you. I hope you're well. And I cruised off hundreds of yards away from everybody because there was just so much traffic. And this was like, here's how you steer it. Here's how you go fast. Here's how you go slow. You know, there's no brake on it. Then we're talking about this stuff. And as we're sitting there and we're, you know, bobbing on the waves, sitting on the machine's not running if memory serves. I and her noticed two jet skis, and they're hauling ass towards each other. And they're maybe 100 yards, 200 yards away from us. But it was interesting as we saw them, they're getting closer and closer. And to this day, 30 some odd years later, I can hear it like it was 5 seconds ago. The smack of those jet skis plowing head on into each other, but worse was the slap of flesh. Any of you that ever hunt, you can hear an arrow hit game. You can hear a rifle shot, especially if it's far away and the rifle round travels hundreds of yards to get to the deer or the elk. You hear the slap of the round hitting meat. And it was the sound of bodies crushing. There were two people on each jet ski, and they just piled up in midair, going 30, 40 miles an hour. They were going fast. I remember thinking, oh my God, like why would they do that? But then I shook that thought out because it didn't matter. They were floating face down in the water. So Ruth and I jumped in the front of the machine and pushed her behind me, and we cruised over there. And I'm waving my arms frantically. There were boats out there from the rental agencies that had lifeguard kind of people on them that were out there to make sure people were safe and be out there for an emergency. Now, this is long before cell phones were as common as they are. You know, only like the rich and famous those years had cell phones. And I clearly didn't have one on me, especially being on the water. But as I got there, all I could do was try to hold some of these people out of the water. One of them, their throat was torn from almost ear to ear, and I remember seeing blood bubbling up out of their ripped open trachea. And that was it left an impression on a young man. And that wasn't the first time or the last time that I had seen something horrible like that, but I couldn't do anything. All I could do was hold them out of the water. And finally, this boat saw us, and these guys come cruising over. And here's the moral of this story. They're like, what happened? I'm like, I don't know. I'm yelling at them. I said, they just crashed into each other. I said, get on your radio and call for help. The guy goes, the radio's broke. And we're a quarter of a mile or more off of the shore. So we get these people into their boat. One of them was conscious. The others were not. And it's not easy kicking and trying to lift people into a boat that are unconscious. They didn't know CPR. They didn't have a working radio. They didn't have any real first aid training or supplies. So I hauled ass on our jet ski into the no wake zone. I got yelled at. The sheriff's department pulled up and they're yelling at me. And I was pissed now. I'm covered in blood. I was scared. I was angry because these people didn't have any training or experience. And I remember just thinking, like, as soon as they get here, the problem will be solved. And they didn't know anything. Anyway, the fire and EMS got called and they got out there. And unfortunately, one or more of those people died that day. But that left an impression on me that oftentimes the people that we think are there to keep us safe and protect us, in this case, some, probably 22-year-old college guys that meant well, then were getting paid $4 an hour to sit on their boat and read comic books, were not really skilled or capable of doing much at all. What level of experience do you want? So I've gone through, it used to be called, now it's the EMR program. I forgot what it was called. It was called the First Responder, I believe, years ago. I think it's like a week-long program, 40 hours maybe. And it's a great program. You probably have something like that in your town, a local college or something like that. I'd reach out to the local college or walk into one of your fire stations and ask where to go. But that program teaches you everything from basic first aid skills, bleeding control, how to not injure a patient further, scene safety, communicating with law enforcement or first responders in things like whereabouts, how to get people in or out of where you're at, maybe some basic stuff about if I need a helicopter, where do I tell them to go, right? It's just some food for thought on stuff like that. There's stuff in there on PPE, personal protective equipment, right? Am I going to cut myself? Am I going to hurt myself? There's some basic stuff on there or in that program about fire science, right? How do buildings burn? It's just some good general information. I think that kind of a program for an everyday person like us is a great exposure because it helps you understand kind of the mindset of the firefighter, paramedics, police as they're showing up. Not so that you can pretend to be them, but so that you understand the steps of operation of how to not cause injury, how to keep yourself safe, and then how to work inside of the area that we're capable of. You know, we start to talk about things like these huge, disgusting shootings, these horrific shootings that have happened in the last 20 years, which is another discussion as to why. We've got a video up on that with my thoughts. But those kinds of scenarios, a lot of the people that end up passing die because of traumatic bleeding and nobody knows how to stop it. If not you, then who? So CPR training, Stop the Bleed, is a great program. It's very simple. It's not an end-all be-all. We have a certain amount of blood in us, and when so much of it leaks out, our blood pressure drops to the point where we go into shock and we die. We need to be able to stop that from happening, which means that there's a recognition phase for us as the victim or as a first responder. If I see blood leaking out, and there's a lot of it, I better attack that problem now, right? There's a difference between, a little scratch or abrasion and a massive bleed. Deal with it now, because if that blood leaves, it doesn't matter if anything else is happening. The person's going to die, or you. Joel had one more saying, and it was, whatever it is we're doing, and this is in the context of emergency medicine, he said, if you need this stuff, you better figure out how to do it, because when you need it, if you don't do it right, it'll be your last time to mess it up. This is Mickey with CarryTrainer.com. I hope this discussion kind of steers you in more of a mindset path than a buy this or buy that path. Training should drive our purchases, right? Training should drive our purchases. If I have this thing, I should know how to use it. I should know how to use what's in it. I should be capable of maintaining the stuff, checking dates. Do I need to dispose of some stuff and swap it out for new things, etc.? Am I willing to act? And at what point am I going to have to pull the plug and say, I'm not going to intervene in that? I have a family. I've got kids, I've got responsibilities. I'm not going to risk my own neck for that person that maybe did something stupid. And that's a for example. Those are the kinds of things that you should think about in the safety of your home. Those are the kinds of things that you should think about while you are clear-headed, so that you don't, under duress, start juggling. What's my option? Should I, shouldn't I? It's not how this stuff works. Think about what you're doing. Invest the energy in the training. Don't expect to be a superhero. Even firefighters and paramedics, for the most part, are stabilizing people to get them to a higher level of care, which is huge, I mean, the fire and EMS system in America is amazing, and we've done incredible things as a society in the last 50 years of doing that. I mean, back in the day, do you know who often was the one to show up? Undertaker. That's crazy, right? You get an undertaker, a funeral director pulling up because they had a vehicle that could lay bodies in the back. That'd be scary. Think about what you're doing. Be well. Don't be dickheads. Get training. Have good gear. Be willing to act. Bye now. So you want to learn how to use a gun to protect yourself, but what are you really protecting? Are we pushing ourselves not just to be the guy that can beat the bad guy, but the guy that can be around for your kids? The guy that maybe, if called on by nature or by circumstances, can do the right thing at the right time, as my buddy Super Dave likes to say, to help somebody in need. So if you have decided to put a firearm on you, you've got some training, you've read some books, you check out the YouTube channels, you read the magazine articles, but if you're not continually pushing yourself, you should ask yourself, how serious truly am I about this concept of self-protection? Because if I'm not willing to do the things that I'm needing to do, am I really just interested in playing with guns? Oh, hey.